Eddie Levert is not just a singer. He is a storm forged in faith, fire, and the raw truth of survival. For more than 6 decades, his voice has moved through the world like thunder rolling across generations, lifting spirits, healing wounds, and giving a language to the pain people rarely admit out loud. He is the mighty heartbeat of the OJs, the sound behind Love Train, Backstabbers, and For the Love of Money, songs that reshaped the soul of America and carved his name into the bedrock of musical history. But behind that iconic voice lies a man who has weathered storms the world never saw. A man who rose from poverty so deep it swallowed entire families. A man who clawed his way out of hunger, out of silence, out of invisibility, only to face tragedies that would have broken anyone else long before the spotlight ever touched them. Eddie is a living monument to resilience, a symbol of grace under unimaginable pressure. Yet today, at 83, the legend who once lifted millions stands in a quieter place. The applause softens, the lights dim, and the silence that surrounds him carries the weight of every loss he has endured. The man who taught the world to sing through its struggles now confronts a lifetime of heartbreak that no audience ever witnessed. 3 children buried, brothers gone, friends vanished, a love story scarred by time, and a world that remembers the music but rarely remembers the man. Still, the question remains. After everything he survived, can the voice that once carried so much hope still find peace in the echo of so much grief? The truth behind Eddie Levert's story is not simply powerful. It is devastating, awe-inspiring, and unforgettable. And what lies beneath it all is much darker and much more human than anyone ever imagined. If Eddie Levert's music has ever lifted your spirit or warmed a moment in your life, touch like and subscribe to the channel. It helps honor a man who has spent his entire life giving his heart to the world. What a cruel irony it is that the strongest voices often come from the quietest beginnings. Long before the world ever heard his roar, Eddie Levert entered life in a whisper. He was born on June 16, 1942, in Bessemer, Alabama, a place where steel dust clung to the air, where factory sirens drowned out dreams, and where an entire generation of black children learned early that life did not intend to be gentle. His father worked long, back-breaking shifts in the mills, returning home with hands scarred and lungs filled with soot. His mother scrubbed floors and washed other people's clothes until her fingers cracked open. Their home was a small wooden structure that groaned when the winds blew and leaked when the rains came. Some nights they ate dinner. Some nights they didn't. Eddie never forgot the image of his mother breaking a small slice of bread in half, giving him the bigger piece, and whispering, "Eat, baby. I'm not hungry." He knew she was lying. That lie broke his heart more than the hunger itself. He didn't just grow up poor. He grew up invisible. One of countless black children navigating a world that seemed designed to swallow them before they ever found their voice. School offered no protection. Some classmates mocked his worn shoes and hand-me-down clothes. Others told him, "You'll never make it out of here." They didn't know the fire that lived inside the quiet boy they underestimated. That fire found its first breath inside a small Baptist church. Every Sunday, his mother nudged him forward and whispered, "Sing it like you mean it, Eddie." And he did. His young voice rose through the air like a cracked beam of sunlight cutting through storm clouds. In that wooden church, surrounded by hymns and hope, he found the only place where he felt seen. Every note he sang was not just a melody. It was a prayer, a plea, a promise. Years later, Eddie would say, "Singing in that church saved me from the silence of poverty. Those Sundays became the first sanctuary he ever knew." But poverty does not loosen its grip easily. When Eddie was 6, his parents made one final desperate attempt to escape a life that seemed determined to drown them. They packed everything they owned into a rattling truck and joined millions of black families migrating north in search of dignity. It was the journey known as the Great Migration. They slept at gas stations, relied on kindness from strangers, and prayed the truck would survive just one more mile. Their destination was Canton, Ohio. But Canton was not the promised land they imagined. Winters there cut through bone. The boy who had once run barefoot across Alabama dirt now trudged through icy streets in thin, torn shoes that let the cold in. His father's back bent deeper under factory labor. His mother worked herself to exhaustion, cleaning homes that looked nothing like the one she returned to. Still, they held on to the only thing that sustained them: faith. Every Sunday, they lit candles, sang hymns, and tried to believe that a better life was still possible. In that humble house, amid the Ohio snow and the quiet ache of hard times, Eddie's voice once again became his lifeline. He sang to stay warm. He sang to silence the hunger. He sang to remind himself that he was still alive. "When you've got no heat," he once said, "you learn to make fire from your own breath." The church choir became his refuge. Music turned into the one place where the world could not tell him no. By 15, he was singing not just as a hobby, but as survival. His voice carried the weight of poverty, prayer, and perseverance, a sound shaped by hunger, yet steeped in hope. He refused to let despair define him. Every rejection, every cold night, every empty plate became fuel. He had no money, no certainty, no guarantee, only that voice. But that was enough. From the silent wooden pews of a small Alabama church to the chilly streets of Canton, Eddie learned a truth that would follow him forever. Greatness is not born from comfort. It is born from survival. And long before he ever stepped onto a stage, he had already learned how to fight. By the late 1950s, the hunger that once gnawed at Eddie's stomach had transformed into a different kind of hunger entirely. A hunger for purpose, a hunger for freedom, a hunger to be heard in a world that so often refused to listen. The church walls that once sheltered him could no longer contain his voice. It was time to step into something bigger, even if all he had was faith and a few borrowed harmonies. Canton, Ohio, remained a place wrapped in cold dust and cold wind. The steel mills roared before dawn, and the air carried the scent of exhaustion. Eddie worked whatever jobs he could find, sweeping factory floors, loading boxes, cleaning tools for men who had already given up on their dreams. But every night, after the last shift ended, he sang. Music was no longer a pastime. It was the only part of his life that felt like it still belonged to him. He and a group of school friends began harmonizing wherever they could. Garages that smelled of oil and rust. Backyards lit by a single flickering bulb. The hallways of the school after everyone else had gone home. They called themselves the Triumphs. Later, they became the Mascots. Their microphones were broomsticks. Their passion was their only currency. Some nights, they didn't have enough money for dinner, but they had enough for gasoline. So they climbed into a rust-red Chevy that coughed smoke and hope in equal measure, driving to tiny gigs where the audience barely looked up from their tables. They sang until 2 in the morning, sometimes earning little more than the promise of another chance. When the night turned cold, they curled up inside the car, jackets pulled tight, using their own breath to keep warm. Eddie would scrape frost from the windshield at dawn and whisper to himself, "One day, The world's going to hear us. We didn't have hotels, he said later. We had headlights inside that car. Still, they pushed forward. They recorded a demo with whatever money they could scrape together and mailed it to every label they could find. Most letters were never answered. Some came back unopened. Others were devastating in their bluntness. Too rough, too southern, too black. Eddie read every rejection, folded the letters, put them into his pocket, not as wounds, but as fuel. If they won't open their doors, he told Walter Williams, then we'll build our own stage. Finally, in 1961, a crack of light broke through the darkness. King Records in Cincinnati offered a small deal, not much, but enough to breathe, enough to dream louder. They wore their best second-hand suits, drove all night, and walked into the studio with the determination of men who knew that being unheard was far more painful than being unprepared. They recorded Lonely Drifter, a song filled with longing and melancholy, a song that mirrored their own lives. But when the record was released, the world remained silent. We waited by the radio, Eddie recalled. It never came. The silence that followed was louder than any applause could have been. The disappointment broke the group apart. Bobby left first, then Bill. They promised they would be back when times were better, but times didn't get better. Not yet. Eddie watched their figures fade into the distance, swallowed by the same wind that once carried their harmonies. For the first time, the dream felt too big, and the group felt too small. But Eddie stayed. Walter Williams stayed. William Powell stayed. The three of them held on to the only thing they had left: each other. If all we've got is each other, Eddie said, then we've got a band. By the mid-1960s, they renamed themselves the OJs, in honor of a Cleveland DJ who believed in them when no one else did. Belief, however, did not buy groceries. They spent years hustling from smoky bars to tiny clubs, singing through the haze of cigarette smoke and the clinking of bottles. Some nights, there were 3 people in the audience. Other nights, only the bartender. Yet Eddie sang as if the whole world was listening. Every rejection became a lyric. Every mile became a verse. Then came Philadelphia, a gamble, a city pulsing with soul, a place where dreams were fragile but possible. One night, on a small stage with flickering lights, Eddie closed his eyes and sang with everything he had left. The pain, the hunger, the faith, the survival. When he finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, applause. Thunderous, overwhelming applause. It wasn't fame. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The first moment, the world felt the weight of his voice. The first moment, the dream cried out, "I'm still alive." He had survived poverty. He had survived rejection. And now, for the first time in his life, hope felt louder than hunger. By the early 1970s, Eddie Levert stood on the edge of everything he had ever fought for. Years of hunger, heartbreak, and rejection had sharpened his voice into something powerful enough to move the world. When the OJs signed with Philadelphia International Records in 1972, destiny finally opened its hands. The world listened, and what they heard changed the sound of soul forever. Backstabbers hit the airwaves first, slicing through radio stations with a rhythm that felt both familiar and revolutionary. Then came Love Train, an anthem that traveled across borders, cultures, and generations. And with For the Love of Money, the group delivered a message wrapped in groove and grit, a warning and a testimony all at once. Within 3 short years, the OJs had sold more than 10 million records. From sleeping in cars to commanding $100,000 a night, Eddie had risen from absolute poverty to international stages overflowing with lights and applause. "We never dreamed of fame," he said softly. "We just wanted to eat." And somehow, the world began feeding him. But with fame came a weight that even his powerful voice struggled to carry. Between 1973 and 1980, the O'Jays performed more than 200 shows a year. Cities blurred together. Airports replaced bedrooms. Buses became hospital beds. Eddie would step off stage drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, his voice stretched to the edge. "If I stopped singing," he once admitted, "I felt like I would stop breathing." Some nights his legs trembled too much to stand. Other nights he collapsed backstage, dizzy and weak, only to return minutes later as if nothing had happened. "People came to hear joy," he recalled. "They didn't come to see how tired we were." Fame demanded perfection, and Eddie carried that demand like an invisible chain. Behind the scenes, another battle was brewing. Contracts that promised the world delivered little stability. Royalties vanished. Payments arrived late, or never arrived at all. Between 1974 and 1976, the O'Jays lost more than $400,000 in unpaid earnings. They were headlining arenas with 20,000 screaming fans, yet they returned home with wallets that felt too light for the workload they endured. "We sang to the world," Eddie said, "but we didn't know who owned our voices." The music industry, with all its glamour and promise, revealed the sharp edges hidden beneath its shine. Exploitative contracts, endless travel, little control. The same poverty Eddie once escaped now threatened to return in a different form. But the hardest blow came not financially, but personally. In 1977, the O'Jays lost William Powell, one of their founding brothers. He had been battling colon cancer quietly, often hiding his pain so he could continue performing. On stage, he sang with a steadiness that masked the sickness slowly stealing his strength. He didn't want the music to stop, Walter Williams recalled. He said the silence would hurt more than the illness. William was only 35 when he died. His funeral was small and heartbreakingly quiet. Eddie walked to the casket, placed his hand on it, and whispered, "We started this together. You kept your promise." That night, the group performed without him for the first time. When Eddie opened his mouth to sing Love Train, his voice cracked on the very first line. The crowd finished the song for him. It was the first time he realized that even the strongest voices could break. But life was not finished testing him. The late 1970s brought exhaustion, financial strain, and internal conflict. Eddie contemplated quitting music entirely. "I was tired," he later admitted. "Tired of the lights. Tired of smiling through pain. Tired of pretending I wasn't breaking inside." But when he thought of the long nights in that rusted car, the frozen windshields he'd scraped, the dreams he nearly starved for, he couldn't walk away. "If we stop now," he told Walter, "then what did all that suffering mean?" So, he stayed. Then came the resurgence. In 1987, at 45 years old, Eddie returned with Let Me Touch You, the album that soared to the top of the Billboard R&B charts. For a moment, the world danced again, unaware that he was singing through exhaustion and painkillers. Between the late 1980s and early 2000s, the group earned 10 gold albums and toured sold-out arenas across continents. They built a fortune that would reach more than $20 million. "We had nothing," Eddie reflected. "We built everything from faith." But success is never free. Every ovation cast a longer shadow. Every bright spotlight brought deeper loneliness. The applause grew louder, but so did the silence waiting at home. "People see the joy," Eddie said softly, they don't see the cost. He had become the legendary voice the world admired. Yet behind that voice lived a man carrying scars no one else could see. The world heard the songs. Only he knew what they cost. There are pains the human heart is never built to bear. Losses so deep they swallow the light from every corner of a life. For Eddie Levert, the greatest tragedy didn't come on stage or under bright applause. It came quietly. It came at home. It came in the form of the unthinkable, the kind of wound no parent should ever face. It began on November 10th, 2006, a Friday that should have passed without consequence until Eddie's phone rang in the early Las Vegas morning. He expected Gerald's teasing voice. Instead, he heard a trembling whisper. "Eddie, he's gone." 2 words, and his world collapsed. Gerald Levert wasn't just his son. He was his mirror, his rhythm, the shadow of his own heartbeat. Born in 1966, raised backstage in the glow of stage lights, Gerald grew into a man whose voice carried velvet and thunder in equal measure. A force of soul, a force of love. Gone at 40. The coroner called it a lethal mix of prescription and over-the-counter medications. But no medical phrase could touch the depth of that loss. At the funeral, heartbreak filled every corner of the church. A gold microphone rested on Gerald's casket. When the choir began "Baby Hold On to Me," no one took the lead. They cried the song instead. Eddie stood gripping the pew until his knuckles went white. The man who once lifted millions with his voice could not lift a single note. There is no word for a parent who loses a child because language itself breaks under that kind of grief. Eddie tried to return to life, to the stage, to the world, but nothing fit anymore. Mornings felt wrong. Rooms felt hollow. Songs felt too heavy to hold. Some nights, he rewound old tapes just to hear Gerald's laughter between takes. "That laugh," he whispered, "was my favorite song." Time didn't heal the wound. It only taught him how to breathe around it. But even that fragile breath would be taken from him again. On March 30th, 2008, the phone rang. The same voice. The same darkness. "Eddie, it's Sean. He's gone." This time Eddie didn't collapse. He didn't cry. He just sat still, staring at the floor as a coldness swept through him. His second son, Sean Levert, born in 1968, the gentle one, the peacemaker, the quiet soul whose voice felt like a prayer, had died at 39. After Gerald's passing, a light in Sean dimmed. He called his father often, sometimes speaking only in silence. "You still there, Pops?" he'd ask. "Yeah, I'm here," Eddie would say, even when the words scraped against grief. But life struck again. Sean was sentenced to 22 months in jail over unpaid child support. A mistake worsened by sarcoidosis, high blood pressure, and sudden withdrawal from prescribed anxiety medication. His body failed faster than anyone could reach him. Too fast for goodbyes. Eddie had planned to visit the following week. The visit never came. At the funeral, he carried the same gold microphone he'd placed on Gerald's casket 2 years earlier. He laid it beside Sean's photo and whispered, "How many songs can one heart hold?" He didn't sing. He didn't speak. He simply stood as the choir hummed and rain tapped against the stained glass. The melody was "Baby Hold On to Me." But this time, no one could finish the song. Months slipped by like one long, unbroken night. Eddie moved through his home like a ghost, whispering his sons' names into rooms that no longer answered. Gerald. Sean. Some mornings he woke believing he heard them singing nearby, only to be met by the kind of silence that breaks a man twice. "People talk about closure," he later said. "But grief like mine doesn't close. it just becomes a house you learn to live in. Still, the storm had more to take. In January 2020, Martha Bird Levert, the woman who had walked beside him through poverty, early marriage, the birth of their sons, and the unraveling of their young family, passed away quietly in her sleep. Her death was not the violent pain of losing Gerald and Sean, but a heavy stillness. "She was there at the beginning," he whispered, "and now she is with them again." But the cruelest blow had not yet fallen. In 2024, Eddie lost the last child he had left. His daughter Ryan, born in 2002, the bright light who kept him young and called him daddy with a smile that softened every scar, lost her battle with lupus. She faced the disease with grace, writing near the end, still fighting, still grateful. But lupus is a thief, and thieves never warn you. Her final night glowed with soft Christmas lights outside her hospital window as Eddie held her hand and whispered, "You can rest now, baby." She slipped away before sunrise. He buried her beside her brothers. 3 graves, 3 silences, 3 pieces of his heart that would never return. Even now he opens the note she left, one line written in careful script. "Keep singing, Daddy. I'll be listening." Before every show, he reads it, breathes it, lives it. And as he steps into the light, he whispers their names: Gerald, Sean, Ryan, a prayer, a promise, a father singing through the ruins of his own heart. Now, at 83, Eddie Levert stands as one of the last living giants of soul, a man shaped not by fame, but by survival. After losing nearly everyone he loved, he lives with a quiet strength that comes only from enduring storms that would have ended most lives. His homes in Las Vegas and Canton hold memories rather than luxury, lined with photos of Gerald, Sean, Ryan, Martha, and the brothers who once stood beside him on stage. Today, Eddie chooses peace over spotlight. He spends mornings walking, afternoons talking with Raquel or his lifelong brother in music, Walter Williams, and quiet evenings in his studio, working on a charity album he hopes will serve as his final thank you. Through the Levert Foundation, he supports scholarships and lupus research in Ryan's honor, believing her name should continue helping others breathe. He still sings, though the stages are smaller now. Before each performance, he pauses in the silence, feeling the presence of those he has lost. "I sing for the people who aren't here to sing anymore," he once said. And those words define the man he has become. His legacy is not the fame he earned, but the love he carried through every heartbreak. And even now, as the music drifts through his home at dusk, it reminds us that love does not disappear. It simply moves to another room and waits for us to follow. If Eddie's journey touched your heart, feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts with us. And if you'd like to follow more stories like this, consider subscribing